So it looks like we're rolling. All right, I am Carolyn Langer. I am WICB's Rap, Hip Hop, and R&B Music Director, and I am accompanied here by Amir Royale.
Hello, hello.
And as a fellow New Yorker, I'd like
Yo,
to
New Yorker!
get us started here.
New York! Straight out of Queens, you know what I'm saying? Young Nas, Young Tribe, we talking Prodigy, Rip.
So I actually really wanted to start with that. You know, I really wanted to talk about New York and a bit on yourself living in the hustling, bustling city. Not only living there, but like being born, raised, and educated in New York. What's that all about?
Yeah, well, I can't really start with me. I always gotta give praise to my grandparents, Martha Oliver, Robert Oliver Jr., and of course my father and mother. Rest in peace to my mother. But my grandparents were from Sally, South Carolina. My grandfather was from Little Rock. My grandmother was from Sally, and they traveled here to New York after being in Detroit because of jobs. They were heavily into trying to figure out how to make money for the family and keep us in a middle-class environment. So when my father was born in Detroit, they came down here. And after coming down here, it was kind of like, it was a fun time because then my dad started to be educated here, and then everything kind of flowed from there. I went to PS 36 right here in St. Albans, Queens. Then after being in PS 36, I was in Renaissance Middle School 192, where Run DMC went. Then my pops and my grandparents were kind of like, all right, where you want to go to high school? And I was like, well, the arts is kind of what's leading me everywhere I go. So then I got educated at Fiorello LaGuardia High School of Music and Art and Performing Arts and became a drama major there. And then NYU, Tisch School of the Arts, Clive Davis Institute, that's where my college kind of education went. And I'm hoping to go to Columbia for film. So it's like, for me being educated here and being raised here, I was taught to be as open-minded as possible because there's too many different variables of types of people that live here. And me, especially as a person of color, I never was able to I grew up at first going to schools with just people that looked like me. And then when I got to high school, everybody didn't look like me. It was like, and of course there was a lot of white faces, but then there were more Asian faces, there were more Latino faces. And it was like, it changed my context of how I lived because it was important to be the most open and most honest and most responsible I could be in a city that could throw anything at you at any moment walking down the street. And that was kind of my life for 21 years now.
Yeah, I kind of feel that. That's something that I really respect about the city. And I appreciate so much so because you kind of walk down the street and you don't think about anything. You're just walking down. There's so many people, so many different types of people. It should be like that everywhere. Mm-hmm. And it kind of hit me when I got to travel. What was Berlin like? It's a very different atmosphere, I would assume.
I'll tell you the most interesting part of it. When I came back from Berlin, the type of environmentally friendly sort of human being I was, because I was even taking a class on cities as habitats, the way that animals live in it, the animal kingdom, us as humans having cities as places to live in a healthy environment. And Berlin is really high on the well-being state in terms of a lot of countries because they recycle. They're very attentive to not having buildings that are so high so that there isn't a lot of carbon dioxide. They have a ton of trees, so much green across the earth. They have entire parts of Germany reserved to just be grass and just be trees and just be canyon. And it's like I said, it's so interesting knowing that because Berlin was a very beautiful city. I had a huge struggle out there, kind of emotionally between personal things that were going on with me intimately, but then also I was the only male of color there. There was women of color, but it was 3, 4, 5. I might be
people total.
And yeah, in terms of just NYU, sure, but then walking down the streets of any place in Germany, I went to about 3 different cities, and I never saw anybody that looked like me. Definitely nobody with these. Definitely nobody with this color. Nobody with the same sort of style. Nobody with the same sort of swagger or just energy. It was just completely different. And being from a city that, of course, throw so many things at you. I was out there and I was chilling. I was able to vibe with a lot of people, no matter what age they were or like where they were from in the cities and different parts of the country. But like being in a place that looks nothing like you does so much to you psychologically. That's how my lead single of 2020 kind of came about, because it was a dark time. It was a very weird place to be in. Night is darker than it is out here. Like noon is everything is darker. And I remember being out there and being like, everything's darker and I'm the darkest thing here, because there's no one else that I could talk to that understands my walk of life. It was insane, but I loved it and I hated it at the same time.
So I actually have a question about that, because it seems that throughout your life, you kind of always gravitated towards that older influence.
Mm-hmm.
Your professors have always been people that you've reached out to. You know, you've always sought out getting that higher wisdom from
Mm-hmm.
people rather than seeking it through your peers. Maybe it just wasn't as accessible, or maybe you felt more comfortable. But
Mm-hmm.
I think both in your formal education, like you said, your professors, you know, through school, you've always sought out that wisdom beyond your years.
Yeah.
But even in your informal educational experiences through your family, you know, like you've always gotten that wisdom from older people. I kind of want you to touch on that, because I feel like that also shapes the way that you navigate through the world, and maybe the way that you've navigated through Berlin and through your daily life. You know, those wisdoms that have been imparted on you from the older generations, I feel like have given you kind of a step up, maybe, or just a different perspective. And I would love to hear it.
Like I said, I can't. That's why I said I couldn't start without giving praise to the people before me, because it's kind of where it comes from. My grandparents, you know, my grandmother is 91, bless her heart, and my grandfather's 92. That dude's a comedian. You know, it's weird. My you know, with my mother passing away as young as I was, my father was of course raising me, but he was like a single father in his 60s. You know what I'm saying? Like now he's in his 60s. He's about to be 65 in December, but like an official senior citizen. So I didn't have brothers and sisters growing up. I have a sister, but like she was a half sister. She wasn't someone that necessarily grew up with me, and she was from a different relationship that my mother had. And, you know, my grandparents raised me in this neighborhood, which is, you know, Ella Fitzgerald, Billie Holiday, Duke Ellington, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar lived like a block down that way. Fife lived that way. Like, it's a place that's like activism, humanitarians, and like everybody that I knew growing up was like 16, and then it was like, okay, after that, like after meeting people that were like 16 to 18, then it was like, oh, everybody else is like in their 50s or their 70s or their 80s. Like there's people that are in this neighborhood right now that are 100 years old, and like I still know them, and I'm like, you still here? This is gorgeous. Like I can come to your house and be like, yo, this is great. Remember when I was like 2 and you were like 8? Like, I don't even, like, how did this happen? Like, this is crazy. I was raised by my elders. It takes a, you know, they say that it takes a village to raise a child. And that was literally my life. No matter where I went, I wasn't surrounded by kids that were my age. Even when I was put in a different room that wasn't always with the kids of my age. Not even because of things that I was doing. It was just that because of where maybe I was placed by my grandparents at certain times, I was known to be, oh, that's the kid of this person. Take care of them, right? And it was unfortunate in a lot of ways, because then in some places I was pulled away from my peers. But then at the same time, it was like I had genuine connections with a lot of my elders. Like I would go to people's houses and eat cookies and like play video games with their kids, but it was like they were much older, and then I'd be in a school environment, and then everybody would be like, yo, why are you so close to some of these people? And like that's like a teacher's pet, isn't it? Aren't you like kind of a weirdo because you like to talk to people that are older than you? Didn't your parents tell you not to talk to strangers? Well, these people aren't strangers to me. These are some of the realest people I've ever met. And it's unfortunate because I don't know how to share that with you. I like, there's a lot of people that like would be so upset with me as I got older and older and older, and like would be so connected to different people that were older than me, to the point where I'm at Clive Davis Institute and I know Bob Power. And like I know, not only am I from the neighborhood of one of the greatest hip hop groups he's ever produced, other than like Erykah Badu and Common and so many other names, I'm like talking to Bob Power, and there's something there that's like outside of, oh, you're my professor. It's like, you're one of the people that raised me, because you did. I grew up listening to the bands and the musicians and the artists that you helped curate and produce and create. Like, you are a part of that. There's a lot of that went into my mindset. And like I said, it comes really from that. My grandmother was very into education. My grandmother was very into communication and community. And that's kind of how I fell into the lap of like listening to people. Not like letting people talk and being like, okay, I hear you and I feel you. And I'm like hearing you long enough to be like, okay, you're right here with everybody. I don't know. I used to be in rooms where my peers couldn't do that. And it was always weird.
So you have this, I don't know, it feels like an eagle eye in my head.
Interestingly.
And like that's
I like that. That's a good explanation for it.
And that's just your perspective, because it's inherently higher up from a wisdom of taking the perspective of like a historical standpoint.
Yeah. Yes.
And
Yeah,
not only are you in a very historical neighborhood, but I feel like you've soaked in that history and taken appreciation for history for your own.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess taking a historical mindset and like embracing all of the past in you and like living in your present, what is that mindset, and like how does that shape your experiences now to kind of be that listening ear? You know, you are not just listening to respond, but listening to understand and then move forward. What is that like to navigate through the present?
I see how much it matters, I guess. Like, navigating through it is hard because there's not a lot of people that I feel, not that they aren't willing to do it, but there aren't enough people that are already doing it. Like, I could give you the perfect example. My engineer, Bucky, over at Cove, I remember when I was finishing up, there was a couple records that I was working on, but specifically people say it was probably the funniest one because it was the first one. And it was the first time I was working with him. And I remember I was like, all right, like he had about like 3 different assistant engineers that whole time. And I was like, hey, Bucky, what's the name of the third kid? Like I got the other 2 kids' names because I wrote them down in like a little notebook that I had at some point because credits. That's where I was thinking 10 steps ahead of like, when this song comes out, I need to know their names so I can put credits down. And he's like, why? And I go, because I want to make sure that they get credited. And he's like, seriously? And I was like, yeah. He was like, dude, nobody does. And like, he started seeing that I was doing the assistant engineer work. And part of that came from my education at Clive. But another part of that was always there. Because when I was in drama, I was doing as much on the stage as behind the scenes. And I always wanted to make sure that everybody recognize, maybe even because I come from a theater space and you know, there's no I in team and, you know, the show must go on. I don't like the idea of, okay, well, like, you're performing tonight, but there's usually somebody else that performs your role. So you need to get credit, but the other person needs to get credit too. We can't just like forget about the entire circle of people that made this one thing happen. Music doesn't happen with just one person. It happens sometimes, but even when no one else touches the record, how many people were muses or inspirations or something that made you have a lyric that came to you that day, have a chord that you didn't think about before? Like there's so many different influences that for me, I don't know, history matters so much because the longer I started to be involved with just studying it in school, once I got to Clive, and then it was like, okay, well now there's history that I was just a part of already. Like I'm in a neighborhood that was historical. For me to not respect that neighborhood is weird, because why would I live here? Why would I keep living here past my grandparents and my father living here? Why would I do that? Why would I go to a studio and then not respect the history of the fact that people like Ray Charles and Alicia Keys and Jennifer Lopez have been in these spaces using these exact mics, this exact piano that I'm touching? Like, that's not, you know what I'm saying? I think about every day that I'm thankful and grateful to even be in a school that Clive Davis created. That's me though. History never could be, I don't know, excluded from my life. Because anytime I tried to, I felt like I disrespected somebody. Anytime I tried to like do something and then not say that this person was on guitar, or this person was on piano, or this person helped me write this, or this person was like, I was sitting in a room and I was asking this person, yo, what is wrong with this thing? Please roast me. Because I'm trash. Like, I'm very trash in comparison to a lot of the people I know. So please, tell me what's wrong with this. I'm not supposed to give that person credit? I'm not supposed to give you credit? Like, years are supposed to pass. I'm supposed to act like this interview didn't happen? You know what I'm saying? Like, my brain doesn't work that way. Because in another way, you open a history book in class, and then there's all these things that line up. And then you start to see that things repeat. As George Lucas says, history rhymes. It does. It does. And I like I said, I don't like to play with that. Morally, it feels wrong to me. And it's like, that's why I said I understand how important it is every day, but I also recognize there's a sad kind of melancholy to it, because like I said, I don't feel like a lot of people are walking my path, and I usually want other people with me. And it doesn't always work, because not everyone is attentive to making sure that the people after us know what was going on. All these protests that were going on, all these crazy things that were going on this entire time. I was like, yo, I'm taking photos. I'm doing journals. I'm doing something so that like when my kids get here and their kids get here, yo, you can read these notes that I have on like a digital place somewhere that'll exist forever. And then you could go, oh, that's what was going on. Because that's important to pass to the next people after us. And like I said, for everybody that's right now, might not seem important, but it's definitely important for after us.
Yeah, for sure. And I would hope that people do have that mindset, because you're 100% right on the money with it. You know, like, history matters.
Yeah.
We are affected by our past, and our present affects the future, which is kind of cool as an artist to create, because especially like you know, you make music, film, you're an actor, like all this way of documenting. It's I think you once told me it was like keeping a time capsule.
It is. It's like Timmy Turner, bro, opening up. Nah, this is kind of weird, but it's like Timmy Turner opening up a time capsule and be like, yo, I had those are not my fairly odd periods, but those are my fairly odd periods. Like, there's a photo there. There's a photo that captures. Oh man, I look at nostalgia is like, I think I really genuinely want to study this as like something and be like, yo, it's a mental illness, regardless of what's good about it and what's wrong about it. Like, it's one of those things that we all struggle with, because everybody wants our past back, but like nobody wants us to go back to the past, because it's like we wouldn't have iPhones. But you want to play a Sega Genesis again? But you can't play a Sega Genesis again, but you can if you go online. Like, there's so many things that are like conflicting about it, and like that's what I said. You're right. And I did say that to you. It's like a time capsule, and I'm obsessed with that. I'm obsessed with creating those for people, because I'm like, yo, somebody finds this and then they go, yo, when was this? Like, I'm obsessed with. I can't even. I have to geek out about this. I'm so obsessed with people that, like, you know, like when film credits are going down, and then you, like 10 years later, somebody recognizes that Butch Hartman that created the Fairly Odd Parents, created Danny Phantom, worked on Johnny Bravo. You're like, whoa, that's like sick. Like, you see an actor like Samuel L. Jackson popping up and Coming to America. You're like, this is where you started here. You started with the Spike Lees and like all these crazy directors. Like, that's how you started?
Yeah.
No wonder you got where you got. You know what I'm saying? And that's what I said, time capsules. Obsessed with that in every single form of it, especially artistically, but just every form of time capsules. Oh man, if I could be an architect in another life, I probably was. Yeah, life be different, bro. Life be different.
It's kind of it's not like a niche way of thinking, you know. You're not thinking in a way that no one else has thought of. But I feel like it's a way of thinking that artists don't necessarily like geek out about and like channel into. How do you think going about the way that you create projects and the way that you talk to people and listen to people? How do you think that more people can be aware of history and its importance and their importance in the history? It's not just the fact that history was important and like, you know, now, but like the fact that this is a timeline. We are ultimately creating our time capsule?
I studied cinema studies in I got a minor in it while I was at New York University. And I remember one class I was sitting down and everybody was kind of like depressed for whatever reason. I mean, we're a very depressed generation, maybe. I don't know. But we were all chilling and everyone was kind of like arguing about, almost to the extent of like, they were all, I'm a minor. I'm taking this thing as a minor and everyone in the room was taking it as a major. Like there was only maybe 3 or 4 people in the room that were taking it as a minor. And all the major kids were like, yo, why are we they were saying to their teacher basically and arguing about it, why are we studying this? Like they're freshmen arguing about why they've almost spent an entire year studying the thing that they chose to study. And I just simply as a senior was kind of like, listen, I'm taking this class because I wanted to get the basics. I had taken advanced classes, which I probably shouldn't have done. So I took all those classes and then I just wanted to get the basics so I could make sure that I knew everything that you guys knew on the smaller level. And to hear you guys struggle with understanding what's important about it, you do all recognize that if you all, there's 50 people in this room, if you all wrote an essay about the same movie and put it out and had people read them, you could change people's minds infinitely about this one movie. Because 50 of you got together and said something about it. I think people forget that every time that they leave a comment on Instagram, they're like leaving a piece of themselves in history. Fans are a part of artists' marketing campaigns, even when they don't think about it. There's so many different things that we as people, just when we naturally connect, when you call somebody that you haven't called in like 30 days, 40 days, a whole year, and you're like, yo, what's up? You want to hang out? It's part of history. Because you just changed just a miniature part of you and this person's relationship. I think about that so often because to the point of like how everyone is a part of history and how everyone can affect it and why I make it a part of how I create art. It's like, my thing is that I know that it helps people. When my dad was growing up, he has like, I have comic books in the next room from like the 1920s, 30s, and 40s. Some that his pops and his grandfather were like carrying around. And then they got to him, and then it was like, all right, like I have Marvel comics, the original Marvel comics, original DC comics, like an action comic that was 10 cents with Batman on the front. I'm like, son, what? Like, I watched Iron Giant, and that was like, oh, snap, look at Superman. And I have the same sort of comic. I'm like, that's crazy. But there's a part of that that's important because when I grew up, I was actually growing up, as I said, off of them, watching cartoons and watching films and watching, you know, like just listening to radio that was not of my time. Like I was listening to stuff all the way back, watching stuff from 1920s all the way up because people that were elders were like giving me art stuff. So I have like cartoons from like the 1930s. I have Tom and Jerry cartoons that were like really early ones. You know what I'm saying? And so to see all of that, I know that when my dad was listening to music, he got Songs in the Key of Life. He got to open up the vinyl record, take the vinyl out, put it down, and then open up the case and then go, wow, the smell of fresh, like all of this, like rapping and like all of this artwork. And then you get to read the liner notes. Genius.com is probably like the newest version of that, but people don't even really care about credits anymore. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm very obsessed with trying to make sure that like everything that I did right here at this point in time, when we move forward, you know that there was stuff going on way back here that connects to stuff. You can see the puzzle. If I was a 1,000 puzzle piece project, you have every single puzzle piece. I didn't leave any puzzle pieces out of the box for you to have to search for them like Wonka bars. Like I didn't do that to you. I gave you every reason to not, like from 2012 to right now, you can find everything about me. And I made sure to do that because, like I said, everyone should do it, especially now that we live in a digital age. We all exist in that sort of way. And for me, it's the most important because, like I said, after us. Who comes after us? Who comes at, like, if a kid after you can, like, read your story, watch your story, listen to your story, and then go, I know not to do this and I know to do that. You made the world a better place. And that's all really ever focus on when I'm making every single thing I make. I'm just trying to figure out a way to jolt something, just make something snap, and then you go, oh yeah, okay, got it. I didn't know that before. There's something that I didn't know, and now I know it. Whether that's emotionally, whether that's physically, whether that's spiritually, whether it's mentally, there's something that I'm always trying to, I guess, educate on. Maybe because I didn't know something about it, so now that I do know something about it, I want to talk that perspective. Or maybe I want to explore something that I haven't learned yet, so that in creating it, I know it now. You know what I'm saying? And I like to authentically speak to all of those sides of the world so that it's not biased. I don't like to be biased. And that's why I said history being a part of my art just kind of comes from me knowing that it helps. Because in the future, everybody will go, that made sense.
I think that's a valuable lesson to learn.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like you kind of learned it pretty young and have been able to reframe it through your lifetime and continue to reframe it and continue to educate yourself and learn how to kind of evolve, you know, with your knowledge and like take it forward. And
hopefully. Hopefully.
So I guess kind of my last question would be, in terms of your thoughts on your future evolution, I should say, you know, like how do you think you're embracing the times, the protests, the everything, you know, like the history of your town, the history of all of the other towns, you know, the future of all the people, you know, higher thinking. This is kind of meta question, I guess, but like,
no, not at all. I mean, I get how it could be, but I think about it this way. In the 90s, probably in my opinion, one of the most important times for people of color voices artistically, other than the 60s. You know, back during the civil rights movement, Black voices were in the forefront. And there's something weird for me that I still feel that today, our voices still aren't in the forefront no matter what we're doing. And part of me is thinking off of knowing people like them, knowing people like Honorable Reverend Jesse Jackson, and knowing a lot of different political figures around in this neighborhood, Donnie Miller, Clyde Bonnell. Like, a part of that comes from there needing to be a digital voice, something that's breaking digitally through a wall. You know what I'm saying? And I think that we're at a point where just a song doesn't do enough. Just a movie doesn't do enough. Just a radio snippet doesn't do enough. Just a book doesn't do enough. To the point where I'm like, oh, the only way to really make it happen is that you have to flood everything. You have to, the way Beyonce, the way Frank Ocean floods everything. Donald Glover floods everything, because we're at a point where multimedia and multifaceted human beings, people don't want to see Black king and queens three-dimensionally because they don't recognize how four-dimensional it gets. There's so many other facets to Blackness, to Latinx voices. Like, there's a lot of, in my opinion, problems, and what I've been trying to figure out artistically and starting to do artistically in terms of putting crews together for films and different things, is that I know that with this project that I'm working on, it needs to be multifaceted. And you need to be able to go on Facebook and experience it, but experience it on Instagram, but experience it on Twitter, but then experience it on Genius, but then experience it on YouTube, Vimeo. Like, you shouldn't be able to go anywhere and not find it. Specifically because people like the idea of, oh, this thing is exclusive to this thing. And I think we need to get to a point where that's not really it anymore, specifically because the fact that we're doing that to the world is making it worse for people of color. And I hate that, specifically because I'm in a pool of people where even when sometimes I get to the top of the glass, there's still like a cap that's like, nope, stay down there. And part of it has to do with, of course, the 400 years to going on further of the struggle of it. But another part of it has to do with, well, there's also a lot of problems that are just up here. And if we're down here and there's problems up here, all of it's a trickle down effect in high school, in my creative writing class. I was a senior, and I wrote about dying. And I wrote about dying in a way that was like, oh, ho-hum, here we are, right? And literally fast forward, speaking to myself in rhyme and keeping my own thoughts in a box and putting them away to the point of time capsules, literally graduate from college. And while I was in my final semester, I'm sitting in class writing something about death, and I go, this is like, didn't I just do, why does this feel like deja vu? But it's because that's what it is. That's what it, and that's why I'm like, oh, history don't rhyme? It does. Because how do you get to a point where it's the same sort of thing again? There's a point where people become quiet. You know what I'm saying? I think about that all the time. Everybody tweets about it. Everybody Instagrams about it. Everybody's da. And then as soon as we hit 4 weeks, people are like grieving. They weren't grieving at first. They were just angry. Now they're grieving. And then a little bit after that, maybe a month, 2 months later, you don't hear anything about it anymore. And that happens every time, which is why I don't stop talking. I just don't. I'm always.
Good for you.
It always happens for me. So, like I said, that's kind of my stance on it, and that's how I hope to kind of figure out how to just plaster the truth of who my people are everywhere, because I think that's the importance of people of that world. Like, that's the only way to do it. It's the only way to do it. Every television, every radio station, every book, no matter where you go, it's got to be like They Live. The genre, you just got to like look everywhere and be like, it's everywhere. Can't hide from it now. Sorry. So that's where I'm at with it.
Yeah, perpetuation of all of it, everything. I think that would help people who aren't willing to see be able to, without even whether they're willing or not.
Yeah.
Definitely. And that's kind of the whole goal, right? At the end of the day, is just to be seen and heard and shown that you are there, you count. So something I actually wanted to talk to you about, and I don't know if you saw me looking down at some points in the interview, but I was trying to search for this lyric. I wrote it down because I can't even find it in my notebook of which song it comes from. Either People Say or Hold It Down. You were talking about how you always feel like you're getting to the top of the bottle, and then there's the bottle cap that's like, oh, nope. And you have this lyric about how, sometimes the sky doesn't even feel like the limit or something, or like the sky is limited.
I think I know which one it is. It's probably Hold It Down Freestyle. It's probably Hold It Down Freestyle. And Hold It Down Freestyle, I go, it's whole legion turn evil, and somehow I'm supposed to cure us like we got legions. Frequently be icky, Vicky, so ill with these chips on our shoulders like our sky got a limit. Fly as a buzzard, but our shots getting blocked. There's some irony in that. And I don't know what the heck to tell you about our cuts since we were naked. Women scream like I'm Wes Craven. Yes, I remember. I now remember.
Okay, yeah, it's a Turner reference.
There it is though.
Okay.
Yeah,
I
Fly
kind
as
of
a
want you
buzzard,
to
but our
touch on
shots
that
getting blocked.
Yeah, I want you to talk about that because, everybody's told the sky is the limit and the sky is limitless, and you take this different perspective. I was very intrigued by that.
I think about that all the time. I think about my entire life. For me personally, I was told, yo, soar, right? And then I've came to understand as I got older, of course, I'm a cis black male, right? Cool. What sucks for me is like, I'm also in the black spectrum, in the black diaspora, I'm more fair skinned. So my observations and kind of encouragements, of course, I was like fighting every single inch I could to get into certain rooms, but then I would notice that sometimes I'd get into a room a little bit easier, whether that was because of how I looked or whether that's just because I tried to be softer in how I approach things. I'd get into certain rooms. Fly as a buzzer, but our shots are getting blocked. There's some irony in that because first of all, a buzzard, as in like almost like a vulture, having to like fight for scraps with other vultures, being crabs in a barrel, first of all, that's just like, for me, I felt like that my entire life. To be Black and fighting with my own people to try to survive, not even just against the enemies that we might believe we have and that we do have, but just against ourselves. Just because we don't even, after so many years of it, there's a point where some people were raised to think completely different other ways than other people in the diaspora. So like if you're in Africa, you don't really know what it means to be African American. And you don't really want to know because you didn't come over there and experience it. So you were lucky enough to not have to take the ship ride, if you want to call it that. And then at the same time, okay, well, like, we're in a position where, like, yo, we're supposed to go to college, we're supposed to get master's degrees, PhDs, like, we're supposed to change the world for our own people. But we can't even do that because we don't even got the wealth to do that. Like, there's so much of it that's layered for me, because I literally was able to get, I was able to get to this bachelor's, but then it's like, all right, am I going to be able to get to this master's? Am I going to be able to pass my grandmother's degree and get to a PhD? Like, am I going to be able to do that for my kids? I don't know. But a part of that comes from, as much as I've had to struggle trying to show other people that look like me, yo, you can make it to this point, so that I go back to my high school and I go back to my middle school and my elementary school and like, look, your boy got a bachelor's. That's going to be you one day. You know what I'm saying? As much as I could do that. I also have people that are like, yo, why are you trying to go that high? And I'm like, as you said, sky's the limit. But then there is that cap. You know what I'm saying? That to be able to fly so high above everybody else, but everybody's looking at you like, yeah, but you still a vulture though. At the same time, like, that's crazy. Just that alone is crazy. And then on top of that, okay, like, you're fly, so there's no way that you're gonna miss this 3-pointer, Curry. That's not possible. Like, that's not it. That's not gonna happen for you. There's no way. And then, no, somebody taller is gonna make sure that you can't get the ball in the basket at all times.
So kind of touching on your connection to home in Hold It Down, you actually, you said something. I guess life doesn't really treat you as fair as your skin tends to be. And I kind of took that as like, because you're still living at home. Is that like you and your grandparents outside of your house on the cover?
Yeah.
That you've been going to school there since elementary.
Elementary. Point
legendary?
is to make it go legendary. Yeah.
So like that atmosphere, you know, like your continual connection to being at home. I guess I'm just curious about it.
Yeah, I'm a very family-oriented guy. I've always been a very family-oriented guy because my chauffeur my entire life was either my father or my grandfather or my grandmother walking me home from school. I wasn't really allowed to take the bus or the train until I was in high school. And even the first day of high school, my dad hopped on the train with me to teach me how to get to school, and he took the train back. So that I knew that, and then I would walk that path, and then with my friends, I started to find other ways to get home. But like, that was always kind of a part of my story. You know, my hope is to never stop living in this house. Not because I won't have other places to live, not because I won't get other apartments in other cities or buy a mansion or whatever, which I don't really need. Like, my point is to just stay here and just keep growing this community out. Because it got to a point after a while where like my grandmother is an interesting case because her father, Foster Ellison, owned 400 acres of land in South Carolina. like was given that land in a racist neighborhood, surrounded by people that are like, yo, like down the block, you might be seeing somebody hanged. It was like insane. But for me, it was always about family because I've seen my grandmother become the last of her lineage. I like saw that happen where all of her brothers and sisters weren't on the earth anymore, and then she's the last one. I've seen my grandfather, like he has great relationships with his siblings that are still alive, but like I've seen how now he's here and now this is the rest of his legacy. I see my father's still here. This is the rest of his legacy. My mother's rest of the legacy, all of it is this house, the house next door, down south. Like, so I always cared so much about my family because my family put so much into making sure that I got everything that I needed to get. And, you know, I think about all the time, like, just like specifically the fact of like, I grew up, you know, coming home and, you know, my family would be like, hey, like, how are you? You know, everything good? Like you feeling well today? And I would go, yeah. Now I come home and I ask them that. And that's a very weird cycle. You know what I'm saying? Like to be, and to know that they're from Detroit, you know, where Motown is from, and to come here and then be in another legendary African American Negro neighborhood. Like that's like insane to me. That's like insane. Like by serendipity, by coincidence, you're just like continuing to be a part of history. Even when you're silent in it, even when you're not on the artistic side of it, you were part of the political side of it. Even when you weren't on the political side of it, you were on the medical side of it. Even when you aren't on the medical side, you're on the technical side or whatever, you know? So that's why I said family for me, life hasn't always been fair in terms of just life, in terms of me being in a place and not always feeling like I was in the right place at the right time. Overarchingly, yes, but like having to deal with so many struggles to stay sane for 21 years of life, right? But then come home and feel safe always. Where no matter what, I never didn't feel safe here. I felt very unsafe in a lot of other places. Even when things were not always great here, I was safe here. I didn't want to leave this place. And like I said, for me, it was, I thought I was insane. My grandfather thought I was insane because for me to not be in the house for so long, every day in Berlin, I'm calling my family. I know a lot of kids that weren't doing that. They're like, I could call my family every other. I was like, nah, every day. It's 3 a.m. in Berlin. Whatever time it was here, I was like, yo, hey, can we chat? Every day. Because for me, they've mattered the most in my life. And I've mattered the most in there. So it only feels fair to give back and be, you know, and appreciate the places that have taken care of me for so long. I know the name of every single teacher I've ever had. It's like all of that comes from being in an environment like this that was like, we're going to take care of you. Not even thinking about the fact that you're going to take care of us. So that's why I'm like, no, I have to. I have to do that. And that's my hope for when I have a family, and then when my families have families, it's like that's what'll keep happening, because that's what I
want. You hope to create. Actually, brings me to in season, because I would love to talk about in season, a track that you haven't fully put out there into the world, but
a little sneaky peek.
A little sneaky peek. I really like it though. There's this one line that I told you I wanted to talk to you about because I would like you to elaborate. First off, just like the beautiful rhyme scheme of these distressing epidemic confessions dressed as majestic lessons. I would like you to teach me a majestic lesson, Amir, and let's end it off on that one. All right.
That song, it comes from a lot of like anger. It comes from a lot of anger of being in a time where now that I've graduated school and now that certain things are happening for me, like I've seen friends become enemies. I've seen some of my enemies become my friends. I've seen like, I went from being a student at Clive Davis Institute to being an adjunct there. Like I've switched so many different positions. And one of the greatest things that I learned during this entire pandemic was to be, and I hate saying it this way, but one has to be selfish before they can be an altruistic person. And that has been such a weird thing for me, because I'm altruistic first. Like, I'm always like, I'll give somebody else the clothes off my back before I care about the thunderstorm and like the entire amount of snow and everything that's gonna hit me walking down the street. Like, I'll do that for somebody else before I worry about what happens to me. And that's been a huge part of this. Like at the start of this pandemic, the first thing I was noticing was like, yo, everybody's like, I gotta put out. And I was like, nah, this is a time for input over output. Specifically because while everybody else is scrambling, and you started to see it as time went on, all these artists stopped putting out music. And then by the end, then you got the Kalanis and the Drakes. And like, as the end of the year is coming, all of a sudden there's this huge amount of art that seems like it's coming out. But that's because everyone that was strategic about it recognized, okay, everyone's scrambling to take up space right now. There's so much saturation in the industry. There's so many different things. And that even changed me, because I had a plan to have something every single month this year. And I did have something every single month, but I kept it more silent than I wanted to, specifically because I knew that taking my time to like network and like get the people around me that really love me and that I really care about would matter most. Why? Because I'm stuck in a house alone with my family for longer than I've ever been stuck in a house alone with my family. So prepare for like war in the time of peace. Like it seems like it's war outside, but in your house, there's nothing. I would assume that not everybody has war in their households. And I know that there's a lot of people that aren't fortunate enough to even say that that's true, because there are a lot of people that are dealing with different relationships in their households that aren't healthy. But then at the same time, for the people that are able to find a way to make their bedroom, make their bed, make their pillow, make whatever, that little tiny space, so that they can learn, so that they can read some more books, they can get some more education in them before the fight actually happens, which is when this pandemic ends. The people that were able to swiftly figure out how to get towards a job, the people that were swiftly able to figure out how to set things up for themselves once this pandemic was over, were the people that started to survive. And like I said, that I can't even say that's coming from me. It comes from them. It comes from the elders of my neighborhood. Like, I started to see, like everybody that was like, especially with them, it was like they stopped going out. Everybody else is gonna have to bring me food. Why? Because if I leave the house, so the people that can be soldiers enough to take care of the people that can afford to take care of other people, need to take care of other people. If you can't afford to take care of other people, you need to work on yourself. You can't just be static. You know what I'm saying? And that's why I said that whole song kind of comes from a space of being angry and discovering that. And discovering, wow, I can't help people until I help me. Until I figure out how to get me right at the perfect point where I had everything enough to go, I only need 10% of this. And here's the 90 for y'all. Like, that's the only way I could do it, you know? And that's kind of where that song comes from. I'm glad you got to hear it first. There's nobody else that's heard that. That's the fun part about it.
It's got such a power to it, you know? And I'm excited because, just to kind of preface your other work off of whatever that project's going to look like, and that this is going to be like a beautiful, painful, dark, twisted fantasy, you know, like something amazing, but also something so hard to talk about, you know? So I'm excited to hear your passion, because you speak with passion.
Thank you.
And your music is passionate, and it's gonna be incredible. And you know, I appreciate you talking to me, and
I appreciate you interviewing me. I appreciate
you're incredible. And I'm glad that we got the time to talk and the time to really, you know, speak on yourself.
Thank you.
Say that there is some stuff coming, so prepare.
Hey, December is going to be a fun time. That's all I can say. I can't say when in December. I'm not supposed to, but December is going to be a fun time. You know, I'm very excited. I've had a lot of projects cooking for a long time, and this is probably, there's a couple of things that will be happening in October and September that are more on the film and acting side, but the music side of it is fully a December thing, and I'm really excited to kind of put it out into the world and see how people react to it.
All right, cool. This has been awesome.
Bless.
Amir Royale, Carolyn Langer duo. Let's go.